The sea mist of a world unknown kissed the cheeks of Captain Jack Steele as he stood on the jagged shore, his gaze drawn to the twin suns bleeding gold across an alien sky. Behind him, the ISS Odyssey loomed like a sentinel, its silver hull catching the light, a symbol of Earth's reach into the stars. They had come not in conquest, but in hope. The Krongo Empire spread like a shadow across the galaxy, and Jack's mission was simple: find allies before the darkness consumed them all. But hope often wears unfamiliar faces. The village they discovered, nestled in the dense foliage beyond the cliffs, was no fortress, no military outpost. It was primitive by Earth standards, woven into nature itself. And its inhabitants graceful, blue-skinned women, cloaked in woven strands of flora, welcomed the humans not with weapons, but with bare curiosity. Jack's second-in-command, Sergeant Riker, muttered his disbelief in a low drawl. "What the hell is this, Cap? Grass skirts and giggles?" Jack said nothing. His instincts told him this place was no illusion, yet nothing about it felt real. As the villagers approached, led by a tall figure adorned in feathers and beads, he straightened his uniform, masking his uncertainty beneath the calm of command. The woman's voice, melodic and measured, carried across the space between them. I'm Tala, High Priestess of the Orela. Why do you walk our shores, strangers of the sky?" Jack offered a bow, respectful yet guarded. "Captain Jack Steele of the Earth vessel Odyssey. We come in peace, seeking friendship." Tala's eyes danced with mirth. "Friendship," she echoed. "Then, let us show you how the Orela greet friends." What followed would become a story whispered for generations. Without hesitation, the women lifted their skirts, not with shame or seduction, but with the solemn grace of a sacred rite. Their exposure was neither vulgar nor performative. It was ritual, a gesture rooted in a culture as ancient as their forests. A display of trust, of peace, of naked honesty. Jack froze, his diplomatic training failing to prepare him for this moment. Riker choked on his own breath, and Tala smiled an expression of serene amusement, as if aware that her gesture had peeled away more than garments. It had unwrapped the assumptions of the human mind. Jack recovered quickly, though the heat in his cheeks betrayed his earth-born modesty. Warm welcome," he managed, his voice catching like a ship's sail in sudden wind. "Perhaps we could continue this exchange in a more conventional setting." Tala laughed, and the sound was like wind in glass clear, light, and strangely disarming. With a nod, she beckoned the humans to follow. The village awaited, its heart pulsing with alien life and customs. Jack had only begun to grasp Dot as they walked. Jack's thoughts wrestled with the unexpected. First contact had always been a dance of caution and curiosity, but this was seduction braided into diplomacy. And every smile, every swaying movement of these Orela women seemed calculated not to provoke lust, but to reveal something deeper: vulnerability disguised as pleasure. The village itself felt alive. Homes grew from vines and petals, curved like shells and breathing like lungs. Color spilled from every surface, from the blossoms that formed rooftops to the spiraling tendrils that reached for the sun. The architecture defied symmetry. It wasn't built. It bloomed. Jack watched as Orela women moved through their world, bare feet gliding across the mossy earth, their gestures fluid, their laughter unburdened. They greeted the human visitors again and again in the same bold way, lifting skirts with grace, as if bearing themselves were no more risk than a handshake. Riker, ever the Earth soldier, muttered under his breath, "Cap, this place is like a damn fever dream." Jack couldn't argue. It was a dream. But dreams had edges, and he could feel the sharp ones already pressing against his thoughts. When Tala glanced back at him, there was mischief in her gaze, and something else, an understanding far older than language. "You seem troubled." "Captain," she said, brushing her fingers along his arm as they entered a towering structure made of twisted boughs and glowing leaves. "Does our way unsettle you?" Jack hesitated. The answer was yes, but not for the reasons she likely assumed. "It's unfamiliar," he said carefully. "Different doesn't mean wrong, but sometimes it takes time to understand what you're fought for." Seeing, Tylaxa leaned closer. "Then let us help you see." Inside the grand structure, light filtered through petals that formed the ceiling, casting soft hues across a floor cushioned with moss and fragrant silks. The air was thick with incense, and the faint pulse of music, though no instrument could be seen. It felt more like a temple than a home devoted not to gods of wrath or justice, but to the pursuit of sensation, of understanding through intimacy. "This," Tylaxa said, her voice reverent, "is the temple of Sci-Fi where body and soul become one." Dozens of Orela lounged within, their posture relaxed, their expression serene. They watched the humans with a calm that was almost predatory in its patience. Jack realized, with a pang, that these people did not see the body as sacred. In isolation, for them, pleasure was a language, and this was their library. "Perhaps," Tylaxa offered, reclining among cushions, "a demonstration would clarify what words cannot." Riker made a noise half protest, half plea, but Jack raised a hand. He was still a captain. He still had command. "We're grateful," he said, "but we must be careful not to mistake curiosity for consent." Tylaxa smiled. "Consent is sacred, as is desire. We do not force, Captain. We invite." With that, she gestured, and the priestesses responded like dancers roused from sleep. Their movements were neither shy nor overt. They moved with the confidence of those who knew their power, and the grace of those who offered it without fear. Jack's mind swam. He focused on the statue at the center of the room, a crystalline being, radiant and androgynous, sculpted in perfect balance. It bore both forms, male and female, fused not in contradiction, but harmony. It was beautiful, terrifying, divine. "That," Tylaxa whispered, seeing where his eyes had landed, "is Siba herself, the goddess of union, of evolution, of pleasure beyond flesh. She teaches us that only through openness can we transcend our nature." Jack wasn't sure what alarmed him more, the message or the part of himself that wanted to understand it. The temple pulsed with a sensual rhythm, as if the very air breathed along with the worshippers. Jack stood still in the middle of it all, willing himself to remember duty, earth, and the mission. But temptation doesn't always come as temptation. Sometimes it arrives cloaked in culture and peace, in smiles that make you question what harm there could ever be in surrender. "I think we've seen enough," Jack said at last, his voice tight with restraint. Tylaxa tilted her head, unreadable. "You fear what you do not yet know." "I fear distraction," Jack replied. "My people need your help. This galaxy is bleeding. We don't have time for exploration." "Exploration," she echoed, amused. "Is that not why you came?" Jack looked away, retreating into the logic of command. "Sergeant, we're returning to the ship." Riker, still dazed, nodded slowly, dragging his eyes away from the living mural of alien intimacy before them. As they made their exit, Jack felt Tylaxa's gaze on his back, curious, knowing, patient. Back aboard the Odyssey, steel replaced vines, and the hum of technology grounded Jack like a cold shower. But his mind was still tangled in blue skin and whispered promises. In the solitude of his quarters, he tried to sort desire from diplomacy. Instinct from intuition. The chime at his door broke his reverie. Enter. Dr. Cornelius Quark stepped in tall, awkward, bespectacled, and utterly oblivious to subtext. "Captain, I've been reviewing the biological scans. Fascinating results." Jack motioned impatiently. "Let's have it. But spare me the poetry." Quark cleared his throat. They are a monogendered species. Every Orela possesses both reproductive systems. Functionally, they are both male and female. That statue? It's not symbolic. It's literal. They are their own unity. Jack blinked. They reproduce with themselves? Not exactly. They can, but they prefer union. Emotional connection enhances fertility. Also, their empathic fields are extraordinary. They feel emotion deeply. They even project it like a broadcast. Jack rubbed his temples. So they're sensual telepaths. In essence, their rituals aren't just culture, they're communication. When they engage, they merge emotion. Love, trust, joy, it becomes a shared state. That's how they bond. That's how they decide who to help. Jack leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, feeling the walls of command close in. Diplomacy was a familiar battlefield. But this was intimacy wielded like a weapon. So you're saying, he muttered, that the only way to win there, loyalty is emotional seduction? Quark, oblivious to irony, nodded. They call it the way of resonance. It's how they build trust. They don't fear the body. They use it as a bridge. Jack sighed. I signed up to chart stars, not to play ambassador in an interstellar love cult. A beep interrupted them. The voice of Lieutenant Brannigan echoed from the comm panel. Captain, incoming message from the surface. High Priestess Tylaxa requests permission to board the Odyssey. Jack sat upright. A long silence followed. Permission? Granted, he said at last, then looked at Quark. Not a word of this to the crew. Quark zipped his lips with a grin. Your secret's safe, Captain. As Jack awaited her arrival in the conference room, he could feel the air thicken. Not with incense, but with the weight of implication. He adjusted his uniform, set his face to neutral. But nothing could brace him from the moment Tylaxa entered. She moved like a ripple over still water calm, elegant and utterly unapologetic in her sensuality. Captain Steele, she purred. I hope I'm not intruding. You're always welcome aboard, Jack said, rising, forcing his gaze to remain at eye level. She smiled, taking the seat across from him. Your ship is impressive, so controlled, so restrained. Jack cleared his throat. Restraint is sometimes necessary. And sometimes, she said, leaning closer, it is a prison. He was walking a wire. One wrong word, one misstep, and diplomacy would dissolve into chaos or worse, misunderstanding. But before either could press further, the room was rocked by a tremor. Alarms screamed. Lights flashed red. Captain, Brannigan's voice rang out. Chrono warships inbound. They're charging weapons. Jack stood, heart racing. Get to the bridge, now. Beside him, Tylaxa's playful calm had vanished. Her eyes were wide, uncomprehending. The Chrono? Why are they here? Resources. Power. Your world has something they want, Jack replied grimly. And they don't ask. As they rushed toward the command deck, Tylaxa whispered, We have no weapons, no soldiers. We do not know war. Jack glanced at her, resolve steel in his voice. Then let us teach them what it means to stand beside humanity. The bridge was a storm of orders, voices clashing against the roar of incoming data. Jack took his seat as if stepping into a furnace. Outside the viewport, the Chrono fleet loomed ships like jagged knives slicing through the stars. Shields. At 60%, Brannigan called out. They're not holding, Captain. Target their weapons. Fire all phasers. Keep them off the village. Jack's voice cracked like a whip through the chaos. Tylaxa stood behind him, one hand clinging to his chair, her other pressed to her chest. So much pain, she whispered, eyes wide. So much fear. Jack turned, startled. You can feel them? She nodded. Their rage, it burns like acid. but beneath it, loneliness, emptiness. The Odyssey rocked again, a console. Exploding in sparks, crew fell, cried out, rose again. Jack's grip tightened on the arms of his chair. We won't survive a full assault. There are too many. Too ruthless. Then, as if struck by lightning, his eyes locked with hers. Tala, you said your people can project emotion. Yes, but why? Then send them peace. Send them love. Show them what it feels like to be Orela. She blinked, stunned. You want me to love them? It's madness, Jack said. But maybe that's exactly what they've never seen. She hesitated. Just a moment. Then she stepped forward, the storm in her chest stilling into purpose. Closing her eyes, Tala reached outward, not with weapons, but with will. She cast her thoughts across the void, seeking the jagged minds of the Krongo warriors. Their hate clawed at her like fire, but she answered not with resistance, but with light. She gave them memories of gardens in bloom, of laughter shared under violet moons, of sacred union and joy without shame. She gave them the feel of Jack's hand. In hers, the strength of his gaze, the promise of something better than conquest. The moment stretched Dot, and then, Captain. Brannigan gasped. They're breaking formation. Jack leaned forward, breath caught. On the screen, Krongo vessels drifted apart like leaves in wind. Weapons dimmed. Engines powered down. And then the face of the Krongo commander filled the display reptilian. Fierce, but now softened by confusion. I feel strange, the creature muttered. Warm, as if I no longer wish to kill. The bridge fell silent. Tears shimmered in Tala's eyes. Jack rose slowly, took her hand, and whispered, You did it. No, she said softly. We did. The bridge erupted not in panic, but in awe. Laughter broke like a dam, cascading from station to station. Cheers rose, uncontained, as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. The Krongo, those iron-hearted marauders, had fallen still under the weight of a single emotion they had never learned to name. Jack turned to Tala, the bridge lights catching in her violet eyes. He touched her cheek, gently, reverently. You saved them, not just us but them too. She smiled, but it was not a victory grin. It was something gentler. Sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones hidden behind teeth and scales. Around them, the crew clapped and whistled, a chorus of joy shaking the fatigue from their shoulders. But Jack only saw her, this high priestess from a world of open hearts and unguarded souls. And then she pulled him in. Their lips met not. As performance, not as politics, but as two forces long adrift finally drawn into orbit. The room vanished. The galaxy faded. Only this one truth remained. They were no longer strangers. When the kiss ended, Jack looked sheepishly at his crew. All right, enough. Back to work. We've still got a planet to save. The room burst into chuckles, but the energy had changed. The war was not over, but something had shifted in the fabric of fate. Later, when the dust settled and the Krongo ships retreated, peaceful, bewildered, transformed, the real celebration began. Orela pulsed with life. Music rose from the trees. The air shimmered with the scent of joy. The people, once serene, danced wild beneath the moonlight, skirts twirling, laughter ringing. The festival was not about victory. It was about survival and about honoring the unexpected bond between stars and strangers. Tala shone brightest among them, adorned in a gown of light and silk, her steps both regal and inviting. She moved through her people like a whisper of wind through petals. Jack stood at the edge of the crowd, watching, smiling. And when she turned, eyes locking onto his, he knew there was no resisting the pull. She beckoned, and he followed. They slipped through the revelry like shadows passing. Beneath constellations, hand in hand, hearts thundering in silent sync. The temple awaited once more, but not as a place of spectacle or ritual. Tonight, it was sanctuary within. The air hung heavy with incense and memory. Cushions spilled across the floor, like islands in a sea of longing. The glow of bioluminescent. Petals cast their skin in shades of starlight. Jack turned to her, words abandoned in favor of breath. Tala touched his chest, her fingers sifting through the rhythms of his heartbeat. "Now that your mission is done," she whispered, "what mission will you choose next?" He traced the edge of her jaw, voice low. "Whatever path brings me back to you." Clothes fell away like veils from truth. There was no shame between them, no performance, only the gravity of two lives colliding in perfect alignment. Tala's body was poetry rendered in flesh, strong, supple, and possibly alive. Jack worshipped every curve with lips and hands, not to claim, but to know. She gasped beneath his mouth, her spine arching to meet his devotion. Her skin tasted of alien fruit and memory, her breath like silk against his cheek. She responded not with moans, but with sighs that trembled like hymns. "Jack," she murmured, "this is not a conquest. This is communion," and he understood. Every movement was a dialogue, every kiss a translation of truths that words could not reach. When he entered her, it was not an invasion but a homecoming. They moved together like stars in orbit, pulled by gravity older than time. Her hips rose to meet him with rhythm and reverence. Their bodies locked in a ritual far older than the gods they prayed to. Flesh met flesh, again and again, not in lust, but in revelation. As they climbed the summit of their union, Tala chanted in her native tongue an incantation of surrender, of offering, of joy made manifest. Jack gripped her hand. Their fingers laced tight, grounding them both as the world dissolved around them. And when the moment crested, when their cries became echoes folded into the stars, he knew this was no longer just a mission. This was a bond, a covenant, a promise sealed not in ink, but in skin. In the afterglow, they lay entwined, their breaths slowing, their hearts still echoing the rhythm of union. The temple was silent but alive, the very walls pulsing with the heartbeat of the world. Outside, the village celebrated into the night, unaware that its greatest treaty had been written not in treaties or signatures, but in closeness. Tala nestled into the crook of Jack's arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are not like the others. You carry weight in your soul, but you hide it." Jack brushed a hand along her hair, staring at the glowing ceiling. Command leaves little space for softness. Sometimes we bury parts of ourselves so deep we forget they're even there. She looked up at him, eyes glowing with mischief and meaning. "Then let me help you remember." He smiled, a quiet expression carved from relief and release. "You already have." But even in comfort, Jack's mind circled back to the galaxy outside. The dangers still looming, the empires still hungering. He couldn't stay forever. And yet, something had changed. He was no longer just a visitor. Orela had imprinted itself onto him, not through grand declarations, but through touch, through truth, through Tala. As the hours passed, they spoke little and said everything. In each silence, there was trust. In each breath, a shared future. Eventually, Jack rose, slipping back into his uniform with a kind of reluctance he had never felt before. Tala watched him dress, her eyes half-lidded, but her spirit wide open. "You'll leave," she said, not as accusation, but prophecy. "I have to," he replied. "But I will return." She nodded. "And when you do, this place will be waiting. I will be waiting." Jack leaned down, kissing her brow with reverence. "No matter how far I go, part of me stays here." "Good," she whispered. "Then, you are already one of us." As he stepped into the dawn beyond the temple, the sky shifted from night to morning, from chaos to calm. And in that fragile hush between battles, Jack Steele knew this. Some victories are not won by firepower, but by connection. By choosing to understand what lies beneath the surface. The Odyssey rose gently from Orela's atmosphere, engines humming like a heartbeat in the void. Jack stood on the bridge once more, surrounded by screens and scanners, yet his thoughts remained anchored far below in a village of vines and flowers, among a people who fought with nothing but feeling. The stars stretched ahead, cold and infinite. But something within him had shifted. He was no longer merely an emissary of Earth. He had seen a world where power was not taken but given, where trust was not earned by conquest, but by the willingness to be seen. Tala had shown him that strength was not the absence of vulnerability, but its embrace. That peace, real peace, begins with the courage to reveal oneself fully without armor, without shame. Brannigan turned in his seat, grinning. "Ready to set course, Captain?" Jack smiled. "Slower now, deeper." "Yeah, let's find the next light." In the dark, as the ship moved forward, a message pulsed silently through the stars. Not a signal, not a transmission, but a memory of laughter under twin suns, of soft hands and softer truths, of a union that transcended anatomy and species. A reminder that no matter how alien a world may seem, connection is the one universal language. And somewhere, on a lush blue world, a priestess stood barefoot in the grass, staring up at the same stars, knowing he was out there and that their story was not over. Because in the end, the galaxy is not held together by weapons or treaties. It is held together by moments, by choices, by love that dares to cross the void. And so, the legend of Captain Jack Steele continued, not as a warrior, not as a conqueror, but as a bridge. Between worlds, between fear and trust, between solitude and belonging, between human and Orela, and in that vast space between stars, he found what so many seek but few ever hold, the proof that even across the impossible distances of the cosmos, we are never truly alone.